Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. I want to thank everybody who watched my previous video about John Stossel here, and where it was about the self-driving cars issue. The fact that people are talking about they're going to take jobs. We had a union worker in there worried about taking jobs. They wanted people to pass legislation to prevent technology from taking people's jobs. Technology is always taking people's jobs, and it always will. I actually do gig work myself, Uber Eats and DoorDash, just part-time and make a little extra cash. But I talked about how it's not that big of a deal. It's going to take years and years and years for it to really become widespread. The problems they've had with it already, the accidents that these cars have gotten into, the fact that they've already killed people. Anyway, so we got another John Stossel video here. It's about media bias, and it's something I'm pretty passionate about. I'm really sick and tired of the media bias. It's been around for a long time. I know from my parents. I still remember when I was a young boy, sitting in the living room watching. My parents were watching the news. My mom was sitting in a lounge chair of some type, reading the newspaper, and this happened quite often, where she would be reading, and then she would go, "Oh, that's just ridiculous," and she would fold the newspaper over and go on to the next story in the newspaper. And every once in a while I'd ask her about it, and she would tell me how the article was so biased from the writer's point of view, that they didn't know what they were talking about. They didn't have experience to actually talk about the things they were talking about. So media bias has been around for a long time. They absolutely say that it's gotten much, much worse than it used to be. And I totally agree, because I've seen it happen over my lifetime as well. I'm 57 years old, in case you guys didn't know. So anyway, let's get into this John Stossel video about media bias. This is the first time I have watched it, so I don't know what he's going to say. We'll have to give some comments as we go.
Have you noticed how some in the media just suck up to some politicians?
I'm struck just in your presence.
Struck in her presence.
I'm struck in your presence.
Your passion that you are displaying.
Republicans are treated differently.
I gotta tell you something right now. The only way I would be struck in the presence of Kamala Harris was if she actually struck me physically. I'm sorry, but that woman is a dingbat, and it's got absolutely nothing to do with the color of her skin or anything else. There's a reason why they don't trot her out when Biden doesn't know what he's talking about, because she's even worse. And that's something else I want to talk about. That's something that Democrats have always done. Some Republican presidents do it, but Democrat presidents have always picked a vice president that was dumber, or at least was perceived as being not as intelligent as they were, because basically they didn't want their vice president to make them look bad. Bill Clinton and Al Gore, God, anyway, yeah. Now, Republicans don't necessarily do. You had Ronald Reagan, and he picked the first George Bush. He was actually a smart guy. He was like the head of the CIA at one point. And then the second George Bush had, I'm sorry if I don't remember. Oh, he had Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney was probably smarter than Bush was as well. I'm sure the left would agree that the second George Bush was that was one of the things they harped on when he was the president, how stupid he was. He wasn't necessarily that stupid. He had a college degree from a good college, but he also grew up in the South. He had a bit of a Southern drawl accent, and he would say some stupid things sometimes. I'm not going to deny that one bit. But the press today absolutely fawns over these Democrat politicians. You know, Barack Obama gets questions like, what flavor ice cream do you like? You know, and then Trump, they tell a story about, oh, Trump got 2 scoops of ice cream at dinner and everybody else only got 1 scoop of ice cream. Oh my God, how horrible that is. That just tells you how arrogant, what an arrogant prick Trump is. And he gets 2 scoops of ice cream. Just freaking ridiculous. I didn't mean to make this about a rant, but sometimes the brain just starts working and the mouth has got to let it out. So anyway, let's continue with the video.
If I may finish just answering.
Well, let me
this
just.
is really
I'm gonna go ahead and interrupt you here.
On the DOJ
Are you
and
comfortable
the
with that
FBI,
term? Let's
I mean, we have
just
seen.
on my question, though, Governor.
Excuse me.
Aggressive interviews are easy to notice, but some bias is more subtle. For example,
What a great campaign!
the media have always covered Iowa caucus victory speeches.
We're going to want to listen in very, very closely.
Thank you, Iowa.
But this year, when Trump won,
Thank you. We love you all.
CNN cut away from his speech.
Here he is right now under my voice. You hear
that? When Trump won, they show the video, but you can't listen to his speech. They're not broadcasting his speech. They're broadcasting some dillweed on CNN who's probably just going to badmouth Trump the whole time. I'd like to give you a little story about back during, I believe it wasn't Katrina. It was the oil spill, the oil rig that spilled oil all over Louisiana and Alabama and Florida, although it was very little in Florida. Just one more example of the media's bias. They were interviewing the governor of Florida at the time. And the governor of Florida was saying how there's no oil on the beaches in Florida. The beaches are open. Everything is fine. Please come to Florida. Please, as tourists, come to Florida. Spend your tourist dollars. He's trying to talk up his state like any governor should. Well, while he's saying those things, the media network cuts away to footage of oil on a beach. So they're basically trying to say he's lying to you without actually saying it. Because otherwise, why would you cut to that footage when he's actually saying there's no oil on the beaches in Florida? Why would you cut to footage of oil on a beach? One more example of media bias.
hear him repeating his anti-immigrant rhetoric.
Actually, no,
Yeah.
Jake.
What did I
You hear
say?
him. We don't. CNN wouldn't let us actually listen to Trump and decide for ourselves. MSNBC showed none of Trump's speech. Rachel Maddow said,
We will let you know if there's any news made.
Maddow says it's
There's
not
any news
responsible
made.
to broadcast Trump live because
Right.
he lies
Because
so much.
they want
But we
to
reporters
filter
can point
what
that
you
out
see.
instead of cutting away when he talks. I've repeatedly reported on Trump's lies. Trump lies even about unimportant things like the crowd at his inauguration, the ratings of his TV show. But Biden lies too. Here he lies about doing well in law school.
Ended up in the top half of my class.
Biden now concedes he did not graduate in the top half of his law school class.
No,
He
he
also
didn't.
lied when he said,
I have never discussed with my son or
Big
my
lie.
brother or anyone else.
Big lie incoming here.
With their businesses, period.
I shouldn't be surprised that the media treat Republicans differently. For every Republican in newsrooms, there are 10 Democrats. And now NPR has actually hired this woman to be its new CEO. She not only tweeted, Trump's a racist, but during BLM looting said, sure, looting is counterproductive, but it's fine because what they're looting comes from a system of oppression.
You see that? This is the woman that's running NPR. If you don't know what NPR is, it's National Public Radio. It is highly funded by the federal government and by other state governments, and then by large corporations after that. I believe the last time I looked at it, it was something like $75 million. I had an argument with my older brother about it at one time, and because I was talking about how it was being funded by, and he said, well, how much is that funding? And I said, well, it's a lot. I know it's not all of it. He's like, well, you need how much is that? So I looked it up, and it was something like 43% of the funding for NPR was being funded by the federal government. And they're hiring people like this that have a political bent. They shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be favoring one side or another when you're getting government money. It needs to be against the law. It needs to change.
She's now the boss of government-funded radio? Yes. Here's another example.
The governor of Texas refuses to give in to federal law.
Recently, reporters suddenly got very upset about rule of law.
The governor of Texas refuses to
Imagine
give
that.
in to federal law.
The media can't believe that Texas politicians put up a fence and won't remove it even after the feds told them to.
Yeah, they're not obeying federal law. What about all those sanctuary cities that haven't been cooperating with federal law enforcement for the last 20 years? That have said all the illegals can come here and it's just fine. They've been defying federal law. Was the press all up in arms about that? It's just one more example of media bias.
But when it comes to sanctuary cities, the tone is very different.
Communities that shield undocumented immigrants by not reporting
I
offenses
didn't know
to
that was
immigration
coming.
enforcement.
They choose not to follow federal immigration laws.
They simply choose not to follow the law.
Choose.
They don't refuse like Texas does.
The governor of
Yeah.
Texas
refuses to give in to federal law.
Finally, the way the media labels politicians is just biased. Argentina's new president is a libertarian who promises to take a chainsaw to big government. So the media call him far right.
Far right, radical.
Far right, Javier Milei.
Far right, Javier Milei.
Far right libertarian.
They don't even know his politics.
At least she calls him libertarian, but libertarians aren't far right. Most of us support ending wars, free trade, gay marriage, and all sorts of things far from far right.
Milei supports legalizing the sale of human organs.
Maybe you oppose organ markets, but it's not far right.
Definitely not
Conservatives
far
are
right.
More likely to oppose organ sales. The shallow media just label anyone who doesn't agree with them right wing.
Argentina elected a right-wing former TV host. Far right.
Far right and Trump-like.
Donald Trump.
Trump-like.
Argentina.
He makes Trump almost look like a conventional political candidate.
Now why would they use that wording, Trump-like? Yeah, because they're sending a signal to the people who watch them. Guy is just like Trump. He's a bad dude. Just like years ago, I saw a survey, and I don't remember the exact question, but in the question of the survey, it said, do you agree with George W. Bush? The rest of the question. It's like, why would you ask the question that way unless you're trying to skew the results in a certain direction? That makes no sense to write a survey question that way. And the funniest part about it was, even though they phrased the question like that, because they thought everybody hated George Bush and they wouldn't go along with it if they knew George Bush agreed with it. the people still agreed by like percent with what he said. Which means more than likely, if you hadn't put that part in the question, it might have been 65% of the people that agree with that. But they're trying to tell you how to think. They're trying to tell you that you should disagree with this by referencing someone's name in a survey question or in a report like this.
It's nothing like Trump.
Economist Daniel DiMartino points out that Malay's policies are very different from Trump's.
The only thing that's similar to Trump is that he went against the establishment. He's funny in his speeches, he's charismatic, he has crazy hair, but that's it. I mean, this is a guy who's for free trade.
I don't know anybody who's got crazy hair.
Who's very smart on economics.
The media eagerly covered protesters who oppose Malay's cutting the size of government.
Thousands are attending at demonstrations opposing his drastic cuts to public spending.
Media call most any budget cut drastic.
Right.
Slash and burn, astronomical, draconian. But at least in Argentina, the proposed cuts are big. A lot of people don't like this.
We never have big cuts in America.
In Argentina, it's very popular to protest and block streets.
It's the second protest against him this month.
But President Milei did something different because some union members get welfare payments.
He said that anybody who blocks a street illegally will lose all welfare benefits. Guess what happened? No streets were blocked.
Who knew that protest...
You hear that? Anyone who blocks a street illegally, not just a street, you can block a street if you've got a permit to do so, but you can't just you and your buddies get together and shut down commerce in your city. It's illegal. It's against the law. It's happening all over the U.S. and it's gotten to the point now. Maybe I'll insert a clip in here of it where people have just gotten so tired of it, they've started running these people over because they need to get to work. They've got to feed themselves and their families. And when you go block an interstate with a bunch of... I want to use some colorful language, but I'm trying to keep this a little bit clean. So anyway, you know what I'm talking about. All right, let's get back to the video.
Protesters blocking streets could be stopped by threatening their government handouts. You won't hear it from the leftist media. Libertarians get trashed. Republicans get interrupted and their speeches cut off. But Democrats largely get a pass, even if you can't tell what they say.
Beer brewed here, it is used to make the brew beer in this refinery. Oh, Earth Rider, thanks for
and that's a tame example.
There is some good news. Today, more people ignore leftist media. CNN's primetime viewership fell behind the History channels recently. More people now get their news from independent journalists who publish in places like Substack and YouTube. Like us.
They're definitely better than CNN.
It's a good trend because we're more thoughtful than the silly people on TV.
Mr. President, what did you
Chocolate chip.
Oh, yeah.
What did I just say? Democrats get questions like, what flavor ice cream are you eating? Who gives a damn? I want to know how you're going to preserve my freedoms.
Our independent journalism isn't cheap, so if you want to help, click that button.
So yeah, like he says, independent journalism isn't cheap. Absolutely. Head on over to John Stossel, his YouTube channel. As I said before, I admire the man greatly. I've watched his career for many, many years. If anybody knows about media bias, he is one that knows. He worked for most of those companies at some point. He worked for ABC, CBS, these other companies, and he watched them get corrupted over the years. And he even worked for Fox News for a while before he decided to just basically go out on his own and do this. I don't know why he left Fox News, but a lot of people say it's creeping into Fox News as well. So anyway, I hope you liked the video. I hope you like my commentary and my stories. And drop a like on the video. Please leave me a comment. Share the video out to your friends. And we'll see you next time with some more Old Man Wisdom.